All hope was gone, until humanity arrived to save us. Part 1. The city used to have color. Kane remembered that. She remembered the long blue towers that caught the morning light and threw it across the streets in wide, warm strips. She remembered the way the market square smelled after rain. She remembered the sound of children running on the stone paths near the water canal. The Scarath had been here for 11 days. The towers were still standing. That was the thing people did not understand about the Scarath. They did not destroy. They replaced. Every sign written in Veth script had been covered over with Scarath symbols. Every public building had been gutted and refilled with Scarath equipment. Scarath furniture, Scarath order. The streets looked the same from a distance. Up close, they felt like a mouth full of someone else's teeth. Kane stood at the edge of what used to be the eastern quarter and counted the bodies. 31. She wrote the number in her field log with a steady hand. She had learned, after 3 years of this, that a steady hand was something you chose. Like breathing. Like putting one foot in front of the other on a day when your legs did not want to carry you anywhere at all. Elder Zayeth found her there. He was old in the way that old stars are. Old, still burning, but quietly, and with the knowledge of everything they had already seen. He walked slowly now. The siege had taken something from his joints. He stopped beside Kane and looked at the number she had written without saying anything for a long moment. They responded, he said finally. Kane looked at him. The 14th civilization. The Harith Collective. He paused. They said no. She had known somehow before he said the word. She had known by the particular way he was standing. Like a who had used up the last of something and was now just holding the empty container. 14 signals sent across the galaxy. 14 answers returned. And every answer dressed up in polite language or blunt language or diplomatic language had said the same thing. This is not our war. This is not our problem. We are sorry for your loss. Kane put her field log away. What do we do now? Zayeth looked out at the hollow city, at the scarred symbols covering the Veth words, at the geometry of occupation laid over the geometry of everything the Veth had built over thousands of years. We send one more signal, he said. She waited. There are species in the outer spiral. Armed. Young ones. We know very little about them. They have had faster than light travel for perhaps 60 of their years. He said this carefully, like he was aware of how it sounded. They are not powerful. They are not known to us in any serious way. But they are out there. You think they will answer differently? I do not think anything. He was quiet for a moment. I have run out of thinking. This is simply the last thing we can do. So we will do it. Kane nodded. She looked at the 31 names in her log. She thought about the market squares. After rain. She thought about the children who used to run near the canal and where those children were now. Send it, she said. Dana Webb had been on the 3rd shift for 4 months. The 3rd shift at Listening Post 7 was the kind of posting that happened to people who had not done anything wrong. Exactly, but had also not done anything that anyone would remember. Dana fell cleanly into that category. She was good at her job. She was reliable. She showed up, she did the work, she went home. Nobody wrote that in any kind of report. Worth reading. The station was quiet at 300. It was always quiet at 300. The stars outside the viewport did not move. The equipment hummed a low, steady pitch. Dana had a mug of coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago and a playlist she had heard so many times she no longer really heard it. The signal came in at 3:17. It was not like the signals she usually processed: trade notifications, weather, data relay, standard deep space chatter. This one was wide, broadcast on multiple frequencies at once in multiple languages, simultaneously. 17 of them. Dana ran the first translation and got partial results. She ran it again with the secondary matrix. The software took 11 minutes to finish. She read the output once. Then she read it again. It was a distress call. That part was simple enough. But the rest of it, the detail, the timeline, the careful and exhausted way it described 3 years of losing, was not simple at all. It read like something written by someone who had already accepted that no help was coming but needed to say the words out loud anyway. Like the last entry in a journal. Like someone turning off the lights in a house they knew they would not see again. Dana sat with it for a while. Outside the viewport, the stars did not move. She thought about the civilization that had sent this. She thought about how long it had taken to compose a signal in 17 languages, how that meant they did not know who was out here, had no idea who might be listening, had just aimed their words at the dark and hoped. She thought about what it meant to do that, to use your last signal, not to call someone specific, but to call anyone at all. She picked up her comm. Lieutenant Webb, Post 7, she said. I need to flag something up the chain. Priority classification. Stand by to receive. She uploaded the translation. She waited. The response came back in 20 minutes. The signal was being escalated. Senior command had been notified. A review board would evaluate within 48 hours. Dana sat down the comm. She picked up her cold coffee. She looked out at the stars. She did not know what the review board would decide. She did not know what would happen in 48 hours or 72 or a week. She did not know the names of the people who had sent the signal or what their world looked like or how many of them were left. She knew that she had heard them. That was the part she was sure of. She took a sip of the cold coffee, made a face, and went back to work. 3 days later, in a meeting room, aboard a human command station near the outer edge of their explored space, 4 senior commanders sat around a table and looked at the translation Dana Webb had sent up the chain. 3 of them voted no. The reasons were sound. There was no treaty. There was no strategic interest. The cost in ships and crew was real. The mission was not. Commander Cole Harmon had not voted yet. He read the translation one more time. The part that stayed with him was not the military data or the casualty numbers. It was a single line near the end. Simple line, the kind that got written when a person had stopped trying to be persuasive and had started just being honest. It said, "We do not know if anyone is listening. We are sending this because it is the only thing we have left." Cole sat down the document. He said 2 words. The other commanders looked at him. By the next morning, the UES Relentless and its battle group were leaving dock. All hope was gone until humanity arrived to save us. Part 2. Kane was at the sensor post when the ships arrived. She saw them before anyone else did. The readings came in as a soft pulse on her screen, mass signatures dropping out of faster-than-light travel in the orbital zone above the homeworld. She ran a quick count. Then she ran it again because numbers sometimes lied when you were tired, and she was always tired now. The number was the same both times. She did not recognize the ship class. The design was different from anything in the Veth database, more angular, heavier in certain parts, like something built by people who had been in a lot of fights and had gradually decided that certain soft edges were a waste of time. The ships were not large by the standards of the Scarrath fleet. They were not impressive in the way that made an enemy go cold with fear at first glance. There were not enough of them. That was the honest truth of it. She patched in Elder Zayeth. He arrived at the sensor post quickly, which surprised her. He had not moved quickly in months. He stood beside her and looked at the screen for a long moment without speaking. Then the lead ship broadcast on the Veth emergency frequency. The voice was even and unhurried. It did not sound like someone making a speech or trying to be inspiring. It sounded like a man reading off a checklist direct already passed, the part where he needed to explain himself. This is Commander Cole Harmon of the UES. Relentless. We received your signal. We are here. If someone can point us toward the location of the Scarrath main fleet, we would appreciate it. Kane looked at Zayeth. He was very still. Who are they? She asked. Humans, he said. They come from the third planet of a yellow star in the outer spiral arm. They have had faster-than-light travel for approximately 60 of their years. She looked back at the sensor readings, at the small fleet sitting in orbit above her dying world. 60 years. Yes. She thought about what 60 years meant. The Veth had been traveling between stars for 9,000 years. The Scarrath had been doing it for longer than that. 60 years was nothing. 60 years was barely enough time to learn which stars were safe to approach. How many ships did they bring? Zayeth asked. She told him the number. He was quiet for a moment. Then he opened the channel. Commander Harmon, he said. I am Elder Zayeth of the Veth High Council. The Scarrath main force is positioned at these coordinates. He read them out. I must ask, do you understand what you are moving toward? The Scarrath fleet is. We reviewed the intelligence, Cole said. We understand. Thank you, Elder. The channel did not close warmly. It just closed, like a man who had already finished the conversation in his head and had moved on to the next thing. Kane watched the human ship's chain position on her screen. They were moving toward the Scarrath. Coordinates. No hesitation. No circling. They just went. She had never seen anything do that before. Fleet Breaker Voss received the intelligence report while eating his evening meal. He read it once. He set it down. He picked it up and read it again, because he was a careful person who did not like to react to things before he fully understood them. Humans from the outer spiral arm, a species as intelligence files listed as pre-significant, meaning they existed. They were technically capable, but they had not yet done anything that required the Scarrath to think about them. Seriously. He looked at the ship count. He almost smiled. He sent a standard intercept force. Not his best. He needed his best units for the continued ground operation. But more than enough. The math was simple. It had always been simple. He went back to his meal. The engagement lasted 40 minutes. Voss did not watch it in real time. He received the data summary afterward, sitting at his tactical desk, and he read through it with the same careful attention he gave to everything. The Scareth intercept force had been larger, better equipped. They had the positional advantage. They had chosen the engagement space, which meant they controlled the angles. By any standard military calculation, the result should have been clean. The humans had taken damage early. Significant damage. Enough that most commanders would have pulled back to reassess. They had not pulled back. They had closed distance. At full speed. Straight into the heaviest fire. Discarding the kind of defensive maneuvering that kept a fleet intact for future engagements. Like they had decided, somewhere in the first 5 minutes, that surviving the battle with their ships in good condition was not the priority. Voss stared at that part for a while. There was a threshold in his tactical models, a point at which irrational force calculated that the fight was no longer worth the cost and chose to withdraw. Every species he had ever engaged had a version of this threshold. Different species reached it at different levels of damage, different rates of loss. But they all had one. He could not find the threshold in the human engagement data. He flagged the report to his lead analyst and wrote one word next to the relevant section. The word was explain. Dr. Faye Alderman arrived on the Veth surface at midday, transported down from the Relentless while the fleet was repositioning above. She carried a single bag and a tablet full of language files that the Veth signal had helped her build on the trip. Over. She was not a soldier. She was a scientist. She was the oldest person on the ship by a comfortable margin, and she had spent 30 years studying species that humanity had never met, which meant she had spent 30 years being right about things that nobody wanted to take seriously until they had no choice. Zaeth met her in the council chamber. Half the roof was gone. The Scareth had taken it for materials. During the early days of the occupation, the sky was open above them, wide and pale, the color of something that had not decided yet what it wanted to be. They sat across from each other. Faye's translation software hummed quietly between them, doing the difficult work of finding the right words in two very different languages. Zaeth looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked her what he had needed to ask since the moment Cole's voice had come through on the emergency frequency. Why did you come? He said it simply. Not as a political question. Not as a diplomatic formality. Honestly, I want to understand. Faye was quiet for a moment. Not because she didn't know the answer. Because she was choosing which version of the answer was the honest one. Then she told him. Zaeth sat with it. The room was quiet. Outside, through the open roof, the pale sky was slowly deciding to be blue. He did not say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller somehow, like a door that had been locked for 3 years and had just very slightly come open. I see, he said. Faye nodded. She picked up her tablet and they began. The slower work: maps, troop positions, civilian shelters, the shape of what was left, the practical things, the things that had to come next. But Zayath kept coming back to what she had said through the whole long afternoon, while the human ships moved in the sky above them and the Scarith fleet began to understand it was in a different kind of fight than it had expected. Zayath kept turning the answer over in his mind. He had asked 14 civilizations for help. He had not asked any of them why they might say yes. He had only explained why they should. He had made his case like a lawyer, like a diplomat. He had not thought to ask humans. He thought about that now. All hope was gone until humanity arrived to save us. Part 3. Voss pulled up everything his intelligence service had on humanity. It was not a thick file. That was the first thing he noticed. For a species that had been traveling between stars for 60 years, they had managed to stay remarkably unimportant. No major conflicts with established powers, no territorial disputes that anyone else cared about, no treaties that carried real weight. They were out there doing their small things, and the galaxy had largely looked past them the way you look past something in the corner of a room that hasn't moved in a while. He read the whole file. Twice. He read the note from a Scarith diplomat who had passed through human space about a decade ago. The note said they are emotional to the point of irrationality. They form strong attachments quickly, even to species they have barely met. They are not dangerous. This is a weakness. Voss stared at that line for a long time. He had now engaged the humans in 5 significant exchanges. He had won 4 of them by every measurable standard. More human ships, damaged more human casualties, better positional outcomes. By any reasonable definition of the word winning, he was winning. The humans were still fighting. He thought about the diplomat's note. Again, he thought about the word weakness. He thought about how a thing could look like weakness from one angle and look like something else entirely from a different one. He set the file down and called his second in command. Tell the fleet to prepare for full engagement, he said. Whatever these people are, they are not going to stop on their own. Corporal Kevin Oss was 22 years old and had never left Earth before joining the service. He was not the kind of soldier who talked about why he had signed up. He was the kind who showed up on time, did what was asked, and found small ways to make the hours easier for the people around him. He had a good laugh, the kind that arrived without warning and took a moment to quiet down. He kept a photograph of his mother tucked inside his left boot because his right boot was unlucky, and he had decided this at age 19 and saw no reason to change it. He was part of the 1st Ground Support Team Cole, authorized once the Relentless had pushed the Scarith back far enough to open a corridor to the surface. 6 soldiers moving through the eastern part of the capital city carrying equipment to reinforce the Veth resistance positions near the old water canal. That was where he met Kane. She was at a defensive post with 3 other Veth soldiers, and she looked at the humans the way a person looks at something they were told would not exist. Not with hostility, with the specific confusion of someone whose model of the world has just stopped working. Kevin smiled at her. She stared at the smile for a moment. like she wasn't sure what it was for. Communication was not easy. Kevin's translation software was built for known languages, and Veth was mostly known, but the military vocabulary was missing in places, and what filled the gaps was a lot of pointing and drawing rough maps on the ground with a stick. Kevin was good at this. He had grown up doing it, explaining things to people who spoke different languages back home in Georgia, finding the meaning underneath the words when the words themselves didn't quite reach. He showed her the equipment they brought. She showed him the tunnel system her unit had been using to move civilians out of the occupied zones. It was a good system, better than anything his commanding officer had planned around, because nobody on the Relentless had the full map. Kane had the full map in her head. Every branch, every hidden access point, every place where the Scarath patrols came too close. Kevin studied it carefully. He asked questions through the software and through gestures, and Kane answered them slowly, then faster as they found a rhythm. By the end of the first hour, they had the outline of something that neither of their commanding officers had officially approved. Kevin looked at it. Then he looked at Kane. She looked back at him. She had a soldier's face, careful, watchful, not quick to show anything. But there was something in it now that had not been there at the start. Something that was not quite trust yet, but was the shape trust makes right before it arrives. Yeah, he said to no one in particular. Okay. The first time Kane fought beside the humans, she did not understand what she was seeing. She understood fighting. She had been doing it for 3 years. She knew how soldiers moved when they were afraid, how they moved when they were confident, and how they moved in the moments when confidence started to run out and they had to decide whether to keep going or find a reason to stop. The humans fought differently. They were not reckless. They were not charging at things without thinking. They made decisions, communicated, covered each other. The technical skill was there, but underneath the skill was something Kane could not name, a quality that she did not have a Veth word for. Midway through the engagement, one of the human soldiers took a hit. Not a killing injury, but serious. She went down hard. Kane watched what happened next and filed it away, and it stayed with her for the rest of the war. 3 humans immediately broke from the objective line to reach the down soldier. 3 out of 6. Half the team. The mission nearly failed because of it. They got her out. They stabilized her on the ground while the other 3 held the position against a larger force, and nobody seemed to find this strange. Nobody seemed to be calculating whether the cost was worth it. Later, when the engagement was over and they were moving back through the tunnels, Kane asked one of the human soldiers about it. She used her translation software, carefully making sure the question came out right. She asked, "Why did you stop the mission?" "For one person." The soldier, a woman named Paige, older than the others, with a scar along her jaw that had obviously never been properly treated, looked at Kane for a moment like the question had come out in the wrong shape. She said, "She's ours." Kane ran the translation 3 times. The answer was the same each time. 2 words. "She's ours." No further explanation. No calculation of value or strategic importance. Just those 2 words said the way you state a fact that doesn't need defending, because it simply is. Kane thought about those two words for a long time. Cole sat alone in his quarters that night. He was not sleeping. He was not going to sleep for a while. He had a piece of paper on the small desk, actual paper, which people get him a hard time about, and he was writing names on it. The ones he had lost so far. 12. The number was not enormous by the scale of what this campaign was going to become. It was also not small. It was 12 people who had been alive when they left Doc, and who were not alive now, and who had family somewhere that Cole's office was going to have to call. He wrote carefully. He did not rush it. Dana found him like that. She had come to give him an updated tactical summary and stopped in the doorway when she saw what he was doing. She didn't say anything. She set the summary on the shelf, the door, and sat down in the other chair. And they stayed like that for a while. Cole writing, the room quiet, the stars moving slowly past the small viewport. At some point Dana asked if he wanted the summary now or in the morning. Cole said morning. She nodded. She stayed anyway. That was the thing about Dana. She understood when a room needed someone. It even when nothing was being said. Maybe especially then. Cole finished the last name. He put the pen down. He looked at the paper. Voss opened a channel today, he said. Dana waited. Offered us a deal. Withdraw, take our people home, 50 years of guaranteed peace with no Scarath aggression against human space. He paused. It was a real offer. He meant it. What did you say? Cole picked up the piece of paper, folded it, put it in his top drawer, which was where he kept all the others. I told him we weren't done, he said. Dana looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the drawer. Get some sleep, Cole, she said. She stood up and walked. He sat there a while longer. Outside the viewport, the stars kept moving. The Veth homeworld was a small blue shape against the dark, and in the morning there would be more work to do. And tomorrow night there might be more names. He already knew he was going to keep writing them. That was not a decision he made every day. It was a decision he had made once, long time ago, and it had not changed. All hope was gone until humanity arrived to save us. Part 4. The plan was not complicated. The best plans rarely were. The Scarred command vessel, a large, heavily shielded ship sitting at the center of the fleet formation, was the nervous system of the entire sea operation. Every unit on the ground, every patrol route, every troop rotation ran through it. Without it, the fleet would not fall apart immediately, but it would slow down. It would lose its coordination. It would make mistakes. And in the window those mistakes created, the Veth ground forces could move. Cole laid it out in his briefing room. Simple language. Simple map. Here is the ship. Here is the problem. Here is the only access point that a small team could reach without being destroyed before they got close. It ran through a section of the Veth underground tunnel system, a section that connected to a blind spot in the Scarred vessel sensor coverage, a gap they had found in the captured intelligence data. Someone had to carry a piece of hardware through those tunnels and physically attach it to the underbelly of the ship. Cole had not finished explaining the access point before Kevin raised his hand. Cole said no. Kevin put the hand down. Then he opened his mouth and began explaining in a calm and patient voice. exactly why it had to be him. The tunnel map, the specific access point, the fact that he had walked those tunnels with Kane twice already and knew which sections were safe at which hours, the fact that his team's current position was the only one that could reach the entry point without crossing open ground. He was not arguing. He did not raise his voice. He laid it out the way you lay out something obvious with the careful patience of someone who has already accepted the thing they are explaining and is now just waiting for everyone else to get there. Cole looked at him for a long time. The briefing room was quiet. "Take whoever you need," Cole said. Kevin and Kane moved through the tunnels. Before dawn, 2 other soldiers came with them, a woman named Rita and a man named Lou. Both quiet, both good. But mostly it was Kevin and Kane moving through the dark with small lights on. Their suits, the translation software, running low in Kevin's earpiece. They did not talk much. There was not much to say that the situation was not already saying. At one point they stopped to rest in a wide section of tunnel where the ceiling was high enough to stand. Kevin sat with his back against the stone wall and pulled a ration pack from his kit. He offered half to Kane. She took it, which surprised him a little. He had not been sure she could eat human food. She chewed it experimentally, made a face. He laughed. He could not help it. She looked at him like he was a strange animal. "Sorry," he said. "It tastes bad to me too." She said something in Veth that the software translated as, "Then why do you carry it?" "Because something is better than nothing," he said. "That's kind of the whole thing." "Really?" She considered this. She took another bite of the ration. They sat in the quiet for a while. Kevin looked up at the stone ceiling. He started talking, not because he needed to fill the silence, but because they were in a tunnel under an occupied city before dawn, and he had found, in his short life, that talking helped. He talked about home, Georgia, the house where he grew up, the way the air smelled in summer, the sound of his mother in the kitchen in the morning. He talked about the way she laughed, big and sudden and completely unguarded. He said it was the best sound he knew how to describe. The translation software did its best. Kane listened to the parts it couldn't fully translate, the texture of it, the warmth underneath the words, with the careful attention of someone listening to music in a language they don't speak. She understood everything that mattered. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I had a place like that." He looked at her. She said, "The market squares after rain. I have not been back to them in 3 years." Kevin nodded. He did not say anything. He understood that some things did not need a response. They just needed to be heard. He stood up, checked the hardware, strapped to his back, and looked at the tunnel ahead. "Let's go finish this," he said. Above the surface, Cole's fleet engaged the Scareth in the largest battle of the campaign. It was not elegant. It was not clean. It was 2 forces throwing everything they had at each other in the dark, and Cole had fewer ships and fewer weapons. And he knew this, and he pressed forward anyway, because the only thing the ground team needed was time, and time was the one thing he could provide, no matter what it cost. The Relentless took 3 significant hits in the first 20 minutes. Hull breach on deck 4. Engine damage on the starboard side. Dana's station lost power twice, and she ran the communications on backup both times without being asked. In the tunnels below, Kevin's team moved. They reached the access point. The sensor blind spot held. The Scareth patrols were on their usual timing. Kevin attached the hardware to the underbelly of the command vessel with careful hands, working in the dark. Working fast. Rita called clear. Lou started the timer. They ran. They were most of the way back through the tunnels when the hardware activated. Kevin heard it, not a sound exactly, but a change in the pressure of the air, a deep vibration through the stone. The command vessel systems went dark. Above them, on Kane's sensor readouts, the scarred fleet began to stutter and slow. The coordination broke down. The patterns fell apart. Cole pressed the advantage hard. Kevin did not hear any of that. He heard the tunnel collapse before he saw it, a deep crack, then a sound like the world deciding to rearrange itself. The Scarred had fired on the tunnel section in a last attempt to cut off whatever was happening below. 3 of them got through the gap before it closed. Kevin was not one of the 3. Kane carried him out. She did not wait to be told. She did not calculate whether there was time. She went back through the dust and the fallen stone, and she found him, and she carried him, and she did not put him down until they were outside in the pale morning light on the open ground near the canal. She knelt in the dirt beside him. She did not know what to say. She did not have words in any language for what she was feeling. She had lost soldiers before. 3 years of this war had taken people from her, people she had known longer, fought beside more times. She knew what loss was. She knew how it sat in the body. This was different. She did not know why it was different. She only knew that it was. Something fell from his boot when she set him down. She looked at it. A photograph. Small, slightly worn at the edges, the kind of thing that had been handled 1,000 times. She picked it up. A woman, older, standing in a yard somewhere green, looking at the camera with a big, sudden, completely unguarded smile. Kane looked at the photograph for a long time. She put it in her chest pocket. She buttoned it closed. She stood up. She looked at the sky where the human fleet was still fighting. She looked at the city symbols, still covering the Veth words on every wall. The anger that moved through her then was not hot. It was cold and clear, and it had a shape to it. It felt like something to hold on to. She held it. She went back to work. All hope was gone until humanity arrived to save us. Part 5. The Scareth withdrew on a Tuesday. Not because their fleet was destroyed. It wasn't. Not because Vass had been beaten so badly he had no choice. He had choices. He was a careful man, and careful men always kept options available. He withdrew because something had happened that his strategic models had never accounted for, and he needed to go somewhere quiet and think about what it meant. The thing that had happened was a broadcast. Dana Webb had composed it over the course of 2 days and the hours between her shifts at her personal station, with a mug of coffee if she actually remembered to drink this time. She wrote it the way she processed everything carefully without rushing, making sure each part was exactly what she meant and not one word more than it needed to be. The broadcast covered everything. The 3 years of siege. The specific methods the Scareth used. Not destruction, but replacement covering. Veth culture with Scareth geometry until there was nothing of the original left to see. The 14 civilizations that had received distress signals. The 14 answers that all said the same thing. The human fleet that had come anyway, and what it had cost, and the names of the people who were not going home. She did not call it an accusation. She called it a record. She was very careful about the difference. Accusations invited argument. Records simply existed. She sent it on every frequency available, deep into galactic space, to every listening post, every relay station, every civilization with a receiver pointed in the right direction. Then she closed her terminal and went to find Cole. He was on the observation deck looking out at the Veth home world. It was a pale blue shape against the dark, quieter now. The Scareth fleet was moving away from it, pulling back in formation, orderly and cold. "It's done," Dana said. Cole looked at the planet for a moment. Longer. The broadcast sent. He nodded. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Dana had known Cole long enough to read the silences. This one was not empty. It was full of something he had no word for. She did not try to name it for him. They stood there for a while watching the Scareth go. The galaxy went quiet in a way it did not usually go quiet. The broadcast reached the 14 civilizations that had said no. It reached the Scareth home systems. It reached trading stations and diplomatic vessels in deep space. Listening posts run by species that had not yet taken any side in anything. It reached places where no one had been thinking about the Veth at all. And everywhere it reached, people read the record that Dana Webb had written. And they were quiet for a while, and in that quiet they thought about the 14 answers that had all said the same thing. And they thought about the humans who had read the same signal and said something different. No one admitted this to anyone else immediately. These things take time. But in the weeks that followed, 11 of the 14 civilizations that had refused sent formal communications to the Veth. Apologies dressed in diplomatic language, offers of aid, requests to open channels of support. The 12th sent a ship. The 13th sent 3. The 14th sent nothing. But their council met privately for 6 hours after reading the broadcast, which had not happened in 40 years, so something was moving in there, even if it had not arrived yet. Voss, in his private quarters aboard his flagship, read the broadcast 3 times. He sat with it in the way he sat with all difficult things, still careful, following each thought to its end before moving to the next. He had spent his career in the certainty that power was the only honest language, that strength was the only argument, that all the softer words, duty, justice, compassion, were just power in costume. He read the names Dana had included. The 12. He read the part about the photograph falling from a boot. He did not change his mind about anything. Not completely. He was not a man who changed his mind completely. But there was a crack in the wall of his certainty now, and it was not the kind of crack that filled back in on its own. The Veth started clearing rubble from the eastern quarter on the 5th day after the withdrawal. It was slow work, the kind that could not be rushed. Kane worked with a team of 6, moving stones and Scareth equipment and the pieces of what had been public buildings before the occupation. The human soldiers who had stayed on the surface to help with the transition worked alongside them, and communication was easier now than it had been. Weeks of working together had built a vocabulary that the software couldn't always find, but the people had made. Anyway, a soldier named Ray worked next to Kane. Most mornings, he was quiet, a little older than the others. He had a serious face that cracked unexpectedly when something struck him as funny, which was more often than you would expect from a face like that. On the third morning, Kane showed him the photograph. She explained as carefully as she could who it had belonged to, how she had found it. She watched Ray's face as she talked. She watched the way it did not move at first and then moved all at once, something running through it like a wave there and gone. He asked if she knew the name on the back. She turned it over. She had not looked at the back before. There was a name written there in faded ink, in the small handwriting of someone writing for themselves and not for anyone else. Ray read it. He said it out loud. Kevin, he said. And then he said the rest of the name, the whole of it quietly. Kane repeated it, carefully getting the shape of the sounds right. Kevin Osei. She said it the way you say something you intend to keep, like putting a stone down in a specific place so you know where to find it. Ray nodded. He picked up the next piece of rubble. They kept working. Cole and Zayeth met on the last afternoon in the council chamber with the open roof. The sky above was fully blue now. It had decided. The pale, uncertain color from the early days was gone. Zayeth looked at Cole across the empty space between them and said what he had been building toward for weeks. He said that in the Veth language there was no word adequate to this moment, that the closest translation of what he felt would require 3 sentences and would still miss the center of it. So he was going to say the simple thing. Instead, he said the Veth were dying. You came. We are not dying anymore. Cole looked uncomfortable with this, which Zayeth had expected. He had watched Cole long enough to know that the men moved toward gratitude the way certain animals move toward open water, aware that it was necessary and not entirely sure he deserved it. Cole said, "Tell me about the rebuilding. What do you need most right now?" It was a question about logistics. Zayeth understood that it was also a kindness. It was Cole saying, "We are talking about your future now, not the past. The past is done. Let's talk about the next thing." Zayeth answered the practical questions. They talked for a long time about materials and labor and the civilian population and the tunnel system that would need to be repurposed now that it no longer needed to hide anyone. Before Cole stood to leave, Zayeth asked, "One more thing." He asked, "Your communications officer, the one who received our signal, did she know we were real? When the message arrived in the middle of the night on her quiet station, did she believe it?" Cole said he didn't know. He said he could ask her. Zayeth said, "I would like to know. It matters to me." Cole nodded. He would find out. Dana was packing her station when Cole asked her. She stopped. She thought about the question, really. Thought about it the way she had gone back to that morning in her mind 100 times since. The cold coffee. The playlist she couldn't hear anymore. The translation running for 11 minutes. The output coming back in 17 languages. All saying the same thing. She said, I believed it immediately. I don't know how to explain that. I just knew it was real. You know how sometimes you read something and it's just true. In the way it's written. In the shape of it. Cole told Zayath. Zayath sat with that for a long time. The Relentless left on a clear morning. The Veth had gathered at the landing zone, not in formation, not in ceremony. Just gathered. Standing in the open air. Watching. Cain was there. She stood at the edge of the group with her hand over the chest pocket where the photograph was. She watched the human ships rise slowly. Then faster, then vanish into the blue. That was becoming black at its edges. The sky emptied. She stood there for a while after they were gone. The canal was visible from where she was. Standing the old canal, which the Veth maintenance crew had cleared of Scarith debris 3 days ago. The water was moving again. It was not a large thing. It was just water moving the way water moves, doing what water has always done. Zayath came to stand beside her. He was looking at the sky where the ships had been. His face was hard to read. Cain had known him all her life, and she had never seen this expression on him before. It was not happiness exactly. It was not relief, though it contained relief. It was something that had needed 3 years of emptiness to make room for itself. She thought about the Veth word, the one that took 3 sentences to translate and still missed the center of it. The humans had a shorter word. She had heard the soldiers use it in the tunnels and on the open ground and in the long, difficult days of the fight. It was a small word for something that was not small at all. It was the word for the condition of refusing to give up even after every reason to keep going had been taken away from you. It was the word for what they had carried all the way from a yellow star in the outer spiral arm across all that dark and distance, because a people they had never met had asked in 17 languages if anyone was out there. Zayath turned back toward the city. There was work to do. Cain looked at the sky one more moment. Then she followed him.